Hello, and hello, everybody. Welcome back for another episode, if not now, when? In today's episode, I am so excited to have a new guest, Brooke Bains, join our show today. And if you don't know Brooke, you really should. Let me tell you a little bit about her. Brooke, she have over 20 years experience in sales, go-to-market, and consulting for businesses, whether it's public health or private trade or venture-backed companies. She is super passionate about customer experience, and she believes that this is where the journey to create a valuable partnership ultimately began. And that was one of the reasons that she found the company Bombshell, simplifying business travel for women. From there, she moved on as a chief commercial officer with Thinktiv, a value creation consultancy. Today, she's also the entrepreneur in residence for Techstars Austin, as well as sitting on multiple advisory boards for other startup businesses to helping them to support them on their growth journey. With that, everybody, I am so beyond excited. Thank you so much, Brooke, for joining us, and welcome to the show.
I am so happy to be here. I love being in your energy space, so thank you for having me, Wen.
Of course. So, Brooke, tell us, how do you grow up?
Oh, wow. So, a pretty standard American grow-up path, if you will. I grew up born in Wisconsin, but moved shortly thereafter because my parents loved to ski, and my mom grew up in the Colorado area, so they moved us early back to Colorado, got me on skis at 3 years old, and into lots of outdoors. So in addition to having a mom that was a ballerina, I had a father who was an outdoorsman and a reformed attorney. And so he taught me so much about what it means to respect and love and be outdoors. And so while I got to be a dancer and a singer and all of these fun things that my mom loved during the week, on the weekends, I got to experience the great outdoors with my dad. And so I feel really blessed to have had that experience and to have been given those opportunities from a very, very early age. I think my parents, when I was a little kid, stories looking back, they would say, Brooke, we never knew what to do with you. You were always really independent. And the first story that I recall of this was right before I was 6. I marched my way up to the community pool and said, well, I want to join the swim team. And they looked at me as though I was insane, only because I was a 5-year-old asking to join the pool and to swim on the team. And they said, well, don't you need to have a parent with you? And I said, well, I asked my parents if I could come up and sign up for the team. And they said, yes. And so I'm here. And they said, well, you need to take this home and have your parents finalize this and sign it for you. But yeah, I mean, we have a 6 and under group, and you're welcome to join. And so I think that kind of started this journey of being really well loved by my parents and also quite independent. And I think that might be the basis of some of the entrepreneurial spirit that I've been able to bring into my adult life and into my professional career.
Wow, what a story. Do you always know what you want, Brooke?
Oh, yes and no. So yes, from the standpoint of I do believe that when I take action towards something, I do know what I want. Although life has also taught me very vividly that I don't really control a lot of what happens. And so perhaps the things that I may want were right in line and great for me, and other things may not have been. And in hindsight, can look at them as what I wanted at the time. And now that I know more and know differently, that they don't serve me in the way that I thought they might. So I think it's both.
Yeah. And the reason I asked that is I just imagine this 5 years old you short march to this pool, say, I'm going to join the team. I was like, wow, when I was 5 years old, I barely even have any conscience at all. And you already knew what you wanted at that moment, which I think is such a gift. So let's brought that to the modern world. And, I'm curious, when that point of your professional journey, you realize you want to be an entrepreneur?
Oh.
Or do you always want to be one?
I wanted to be a doctor.
Oh.
And then actually I've reframed that as I've gotten older, and that more of what I wanted at the time was really to heal. Probably me first and then others after. So, but from the box of the profession, be a doctor was what I wanted to be when I was a little kid. I've always been fascinated by how the human body thrives in its environment. And then how we as souls enliven that. And those two things in combination with our emotions and our heart really kind of bring the full human to bear. And so I think from an early age, I was fascinated by that concept.
Yeah.
And although I do believe no matter what profession you're in, you can choose to have the spirit of being an entrepreneur or of the entrepreneurial spirit. And it isn't necessarily a profession per se. Although we often, say be an entrepreneur or I'm an entrepreneur or I'm a founder. And the reality is I think as I've come to be around lots of different people in different stages of companies, that there are a lot of people who have an entrepreneurial spirit who haven't yet founded a company. And there are other entrepreneurs who may well end up fitting more into a corporate environment. But that, I am mentality sometimes kind of keeps people stuck in ways that may or may not be in their best interest. So I've always found that.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I've always found that embodying the spirit of something will help to bring what do I do next into the forefront, as opposed to being in the I am this and I am only that can keep people maybe not seeing all of the possibilities ahead of them.
So almost like we are predefine a box. I am XYZ, and we put ourselves in the box, and therefore we are not allow ourselves to see other possibilities.
Right.
So with that possibility in mind, you said you want to be a doctor. What happened?
So I got sick when I was in college, and kind of took me off kilter. Although at the time I got sick, my perfectionist really kicked into high gear, which was nothing better or nothing less than an A is acceptable in school. And so I kept on going with school and trying to kind of address getting sick. And throughout that period, I had undergone several surgeries and nothing was really working. And it was this time where I had been shadowing plastic surgeons' offices and cardiothoracic surgeons, and I was also in finance as a major. So I did science as kind of the side thing, and finance as a major because I knew most doctors, needed to also know how to run a business. So while I was in school, and then I really got to see this other side of medicine that made me realize that, at least in a lot of the practice, maybe we aren't healing as much as we're doing other things. And that helped me come to a realization that maybe I don't really want to pursue medical school. And perhaps there's other ways that I can bring my own type of healing into the work that I do. And so through getting sick and having to learn ways to heal my body and heal my mind and heal my spirit. And by the way, that journey still continues. It really kind of pulled me into a different line of approaching the type of career that I might want.
Was it a challenging at the moment when for the longest time you thought you want to be a doctor, but then as you go through your own journey, you realize that's not it? Was it a hard decision for you to make to pivot?
Yes. Yeah, it was. Because even though when I finished school, I started out in investment banking, I still had this pull towards wellness and vitality. And so there was a period where I was like, maybe I really do want to go back to medicine. And so I went and I worked with Eli Lilly and Company and launched a drug with them and kind of learned the whole world of pharmaceuticals and thought, well, I'll brush up on some of the stuff from school. And so I went back thinking, yeah, maybe I made the mistake and I'm going to go back and perhaps pursue the MCAT. And it was in going back into that world that I realized I'm like, this isn't really where I want to be. But it was hard because I did hold on to it a little bit, and I went back and revisited, and in that revisiting clarified that it wasn't where I wanted to go, but I still wanted to continue my studies of understanding, like, how does the human body and how do we really thrive in our environment, whether we choose that environment or whether we don't choose that environment.
Wow. I think that's a lot of courage for you to continue following your curiosity. But in the meantime, when you see that maybe not the right alignment, and acknowledge that and say yes to that intuition and really pivot. So tell us what's next from there.
Oh, goodness. We probably want to skip through lots of career stuff.
So how do you, maybe we can bring back to the moment. At what point you decided, you know what, maybe I want to try entrepreneur?
Yes. So in my travels, I was in Dallas for a bit and then up in Washington State, and then was transferred to California and in Northern California. And there I met my to-be husband who we ended up, and he was very entrepreneurial in nature, or still is. I'm sorry, not was. Very entrepreneurial in nature. And together, we really were able to start to, I stayed in a lot of corporate roles. I got into data and analytics. I went back and did my MBA and then went in to do some work in Silicon Valley. And that's really what kind of got me into technology and such. But at the same time, he and I were building at different places a consulting business in the healthcare space. And that business was fully bootstrapped. So no outside investment. And so during that time, I started to get more of a taste of like, well, what does this really mean to build a business from nothing? And then everything in my career, no matter what role I have taken in a company, I've always found ways to apply the entrepreneurial spirit to do entrepreneurial work within larger corporations. So helping to develop new revenue streams and new products and things like that. And so I think there's something that I said at one point when I told my founder's story at Techstars is, as I said, I think being a founder found me more so than I sought it, because what I found in my career is that I've looked for ways to be able to see what is the strategic arc of what a business needs to accomplish, and then how do we execute against that? And a lot of times that's opened the door to looking at new revenue streams or new ways of presenting the product, or even new products for that matter. And so that entrepreneurial affectation has helped me do that no matter what company that I've been a part of, which is again why I go back and say, I'm not sure that I'm an entrepreneur as much as I have the spirit of one.
Wow, what a journey. And with that, what was the moment you decided to start Bombshell?
Yes. So Bombshell started in my head several years before I started physically working on the concept. And it came from during the course of my career, from when I was 22, 23 on up to now I'm 42. I traveled all the time. So there were parts of a year where I may travel 4 times in a month and be gone more than 60% of the month. But on average, I was at least away 2 weeks out of every month. And so during that time, there were a couple things that really came about. One was I absolutely don't like to pack anything in my suitcase. other than clothes. I love to figure out what I'm going to wear, but all the toiletries and everything that go along with that, I don't want to pack it. But I know that some of those actually help me feel really good when I wake up in the morning, and I can put myself together. And so the first iteration of Bombshell was really around CPG to help solve a problem for me, which is I didn't want to carry my toiletries or hair tools any longer. And so if I could have them shipped to me, and when I was done, send them back, recycle the disposable product, and reuse and turn back around the high-end hair tools, what a great way to solve something for me being on the road all the time. So that was kind of the first piece. And then the psychological piece of a Bombshell, which I saw potentially coming later, was it's lonely when you're on the road, in that you have a lot of friends at home. And when you travel frequently, after a while, people stop asking because they assume you're gone. And so that's tough. It's also tough to be gone, especially if you have a family, to be gone for a long time and then come back in and you realize everybody functions without you, although they still love you. But coming back in is also really tough, and leaving is tough. And so then building a community around that for women who traveled regularly, where they could opt into meeting up with women who may be in the same kind of peer group that they are, or maybe for mentoring opportunities when they were traveling, was kind of the next view of how to bring Bombshell and the community to light. So ultimately, I was trying to solve something that was tough for me when I traveled all the time.
So with that, Brooke, at this point, having a lot of entrepreneurial spirit in multiple businesses, and you are crushing it. Once you have the idea, how do you decide, I'm going to actually do this as an entrepreneur? Which I think there's a little bit difference between entrepreneurial spirit versus being an entrepreneur. What was the moment you decided, you know what, this is what I'm going to do?
Yes. So we're going to fast forward a few months back. I had gone through a divorce in 2016, 2017, moved to Texas in early 2018, and was commuting back and forth to California when I moved to Texas. And there just came a point where at the early 2019 period, I hit a wall where I was like, okay, a lot of things in my life really fell apart in that period. And I needed a break. And so I was working with a company, went to Chicago to learn that they had rationalized my position. There was another option open for me, but it just wasn't really feeding my soul or my sense of fulfillment. And I thought, okay, this is life telling me stop. So 28 days later, in late February, I packed a 42-liter backpack and I went to India. And I planned to spend just a month there. And I actually found a place where I could do work and meditation. And I was so excited because work was like, yes, I'm going to go to India. They're going to ask me to scrub floors. Maybe I'll build some things. I'll use my hands and such. And when I got there, they said, oh, we looked at your LinkedIn profile and we really need some help building our content systems, and we need to renegotiate some of our software contracts. And I thought, oh my, I've left the US to go do a lot of what I was wanting to have a break from. But what was so lovely about that is that I found this really nice balance of just working and living in community.
Tell us more about that. What is that like?
Gosh, I probably need words to describe that because it's a little bit of an ineffable feeling, but it was like being in a consistent state of flow where what I was doing in work never felt like work. And even when I was not working, it felt like just like this normal, normal's maybe not the right word, but it felt like this very natural way to just be in the world.
What do you think contribute to that? That sounds so beautiful.
Well, partly I probably dropped a few things off my shoulders. And I was able to just be in it for the pleasure of being rather than for any expectation of an outcome or any expectation of a reward.
Yeah.
So that time in India was really lovely. And during that time, I was writing a lot. I love to write. I probably will write a book one day, but it's still in formation. And I have much life experience that needs to come into play for that to really materialize. But during that time, there was an artist who is quite well known in that area and in the UAE, who knew I was doing a lot of writing. I got to know he and his wife very well and just fell in love with them. He had to go back to Dubai for a project. And 2 days later, he contacted me on WhatsApp and he said, Brooke, I've got this huge project at a hotel. It's over 300 pieces of original art, and they want me to write about my art. And I don't like writing about my art. I don't like naming my art. Can you come help me? And so that was towards the end of my, what I thought was going to be a month in India. And I said, gosh, I'm supposed to fly back to the US in a couple weeks. I've got a few other things planned. But let me see what can happen. And what was amazing is I didn't pay one change fee on airlines. I didn't have to change any plans, like everything meticulously. The doors opened when I decided, yeah, I'm going to stay a little bit longer. I'm going to go do this work. I have no idea what will come of this work. And let's do it. So that turned into about 4 months. And this is where, when I got back from India, I decided I'm going to start Bombshell. But when I was there, or when I finally made it up to Dubai, I ended up helping to curate the collection for him, which was so amazing. And I have 2 pieces that are hanging in the hotel in the UAE that I got to do in collaboration with him. So it brought out a lot of kind of that artistry that I have, but haven't played with in a long time. And now in my home, I have a painting studio for this reason.
Wow.
So I spent that time over there, and it just was this like creative reawakening and rejuvenation. And one of the very clear lessons that I learned from being there is you actually don't have to go anywhere to have a creative reawakening. I happened to go over to India and the UAE, but what I really did was I just allowed myself to be and to let things happen for me, not to me. And so that helped me have the courage and the confidence to say, you know what, I'm going to start Bombshell. I'm going to not take any third-party capital, at least initially. I'm going to work really hard and kind of take roles as a consultant and playing an interim like VP of sales, CRO for some companies. And I'm going to fund this project and I'm going to get it off the ground. And that was the impetus in August of 2019 for starting Bombshell. And what was amazing is that as I put one foot in front of the other and took the steps necessary to create the company, it was like everything really worked in alignment. And while it was hard work, it was work that had really nice momentum. So the stress that came was more euphoric stress than distress. And it was amazing to have found partnerships with Yanka Skincare, a female-founded skincare brand out of France that has been doing this before it was quote-unquote in vogue to be female-founded or to be environmentally friendly. They've been doing it for 60, 70 years, and have these amazing partnerships come to light. And so it was equally really hard when the brick wall of the pandemic hit, when I was supposed to launch at South by of 2020 and realize like that's not happening. And so it was this time of this amazing feeling of alignment and then a feeling of hitting a brick wall that really, really took a toll. And I don't know if I really realized the toll that it took until reflecting over the last couple years. But it was less about it was less of a toll on, this idea of something I wanted to do failed, but more of a toll of feeling like, gosh, what does this really mean to have had such great momentum forward and then just hit a brick wall? And how do I find ways to have that not same, but similar momentum and not hit brick walls? And I think I'm still, feeling that out. Although the experience in the work that I'm doing right now has been an amazing experience of working through all of those machinations of feeling like, oh gosh, things are tough and it's challenging, and will they work, to wow, looking back, we've made so much progress. So I feel like in the tragedy, that's probably too harsh of a word. Tragedy is very much a first world problem when I say it from that perspective. The tragedy of having to shut Bombshell down and then the opportunities that came have been both a blessing and like huge learning experiences.
Wow. Brooke, that was such a journey. So talk to us about that moment when pandemic happened, when nobody expected, and that was not only shut down South by, but really is the livelihood of the business, your passion, your baby, you've been building for years to come. And how was that? How do you take that moment when, exactly like you said, it was so much momentum, everything so in right alignment, and that moment hit? How do you deal with that? And how do you have the courage to decide to move on from there?
Well, I mean, I won't sugarcoat it. It was really, there were all of the emotions from sadness. I mean, I cried a ton. Like things would just hit me and I would have tears rolling. I was really angry. I was so frustrated. I was like, oh, I've worked so hard and this is just not working. And there was grief that really went with that, where it was grief and anxiety put together. So I don't know if it was a pretty experience, but it was a pretty cleansing experience. And, in some regards, I withdrew a little bit so that I could kind of catch my breath after that momentum. I mean, if you think about the momentum of moving ahead and then hitting a brick wall physically, if you can imagine that, it's going to take your breath away a little bit. And so there was this moment of, and many moments of kind of needing to withdraw and regroup and understand why, and recognizing, now a couple years later, that it wasn't meant to come forward then. But in the moment of feeling grief, it doesn't feel like that should be the answer. It feels like, gosh, if I can just power through it, if I could make something work, I know that I have the tenacity to do that. I know that I have the perseverance to get something off of the ground. And what I realized is the power actually comes from realizing that it's okay to walk away instead of the force of making something happen. And that has helped me go through and make decisions about some other things that were also challenging professionally that came up afterwards. So it was a positive and horribly painful experience all at the same time.
How was that experience shaping you as who you are today, Brooke?
Well, part of the experience, I think, has allowed me to embrace so much more of the spectrum of my own vitality and emotionality as a human being. And recognizing that we are whole and we are human by the sheer fact of the emotions, and how we choose to understand them and respond to those emotions is really the expression of our life. And so in that, there's, to me, an enormous amount of empowerment that comes from being able to recognize and really live that while we have zero control over anything that happens in our life per se, we do have the control to get to know ourselves and understand our emotionality and how that responds to the world around us and how we can take a breath before taking that next action or getting to know like how we fit in the context of the world. And I'm speaking about it like it's easy. I don't really think it's very easy. Yeah. But it is something that has been this valuable lesson that I think has been kind of knocking at my door for my whole life, that has taken peeling away layers of the personality of Brooke to start to embody and embrace and still have grief and sadness and anger and joy and elation and all of those things come together to help me get to know me better.
I love that piece, Brooke. And I believe that the entrepreneurship journey is never just about the revenue, the business launch, the success, the IPO, all the fancy, glamorous thing. I think entrepreneurship journey ultimately is a spiritual journey on itself. Along the way, we learn so much more about ourselves and the world around us. So that's a beautiful insight you can take from that. And I'm curious, Brooke, if we have this magic wand at this moment, if we can go back in time, change anything at all, would you change anything?
No, I wouldn't. Gosh, I might ask to have some of these experiences be less painful, but actually that's a silly statement because I wouldn't necessarily be able to laugh at some of it or have been humbled in the way that, the humbling process is in the moment is really painful because it feels like, I won't put it on anybody else, but it feels like death. But I wouldn't go and change anything. I think if you caught me on a day where I was a wreck, I probably would say, "Oh, I wish this didn't happen." But the reality is I really don't. I take the whole thing and say, okay, well, what can I learn from this, and how can I apply it in what's being asked of me now? And what's being asked of me now may not be what's being asked of me tomorrow. And how can I still take these learnings and apply it? So,
wow. Brooke, thank you so much for being so open and authentic. I think oftentimes it's so easy for us to talk about the rosy, the sunshine, but it's sometimes challenging for us to speak about part that is difficult. And the fact that, you are being so open, I think really first show the tenacity, the courage that you really have for not only being through the experience, but also owning the experiences and really turn that into your superpower, which truly I see so many gifts within you. One of them is you have such a humanity and such a humbleness and kind, and you're just so grounded, and therefore you have such a compassion to everybody, go through the journey themselves. But in the meantime, you also give others the permission to share their challenges, their setbacks, if they have something in a similar challenges. So that's amazing.
Thank you.
Brooke, I wonder, now you've been through so much, I'm curious, what inspired you? If you can dream about the future, what do you want ultimately?
Oh, goodness. I think what inspires me today is each one of our capacity for love. And we don't often talk about that in business as much. But one of the things that I think is such a transformative aspect of what we can bring into business is this idea of being able to greet every day with love. And sometimes that doesn't always feel rosy. But it can in greeting the day with that, it's amazing what will present itself to open at least my eyes to that there are so many areas of embracing humanity and helping people rise, no matter what position of life that they're in.
Yeah.
I think that probably inspires me more than anything else. And it probably drives a lot of the way that I hope to be able to give back to people who work with me, which is, if somebody quote unquote reports to me in an organization, if I say yes to that, it becomes my responsibility and my privilege to see them rise up.
Why is that important for you?
It's important because I think when each one of us chooses to do that for just one other person, that is an act of change that does inspire events that we have no ability to see the downstream or the upstream effects from. That may have been a poorly worded sentence. But I think that that's the place where there's much talk of, wanting to change the world, wanting to change that. What I have learned through the experiences so far is that the most humane way to change the world is to change ourselves in relation to the world that we have created around ourselves. And that is an amazing choice that empowers or can disempower. And that is where I believe that when I think about in anything I'm doing, if I can be able to give to somebody in a way where I'm expressing an authentic love for them, even if they're driving me bananas, that is one way to help somebody else rise in the moment. And when that happens once, it can create a ripple effect that really does help other people to rise that has nothing to do with me, but has to do with maybe one small act. And that to me is where the world can shift.
Wow, Brooke. I really, really inspired by the vision. And I think when you said the love, I believe that you have such a gift to seeing the light in each and every one of the people surrounding you. And when you say the love, and my understanding is you are empowering them, the individuals, to go after and to rise above the circumstance. So then we all can be a better version of ourselves. And collectively, the world is a better place because of that. And I'm just really inspired by your commitment, by your determination to really empower everybody around you. And in my own word, I think that each and every one of us is like little light bulb. And if today I can enable your light bulb just shine one pixel brighter, today the whole world is a brighter and a happier place. And I think on that note, I think we are on the same mission, which therefore I'm just so inspired by how you beautifully worded, to show our love every day, just one day at a time.
Yeah.
With that, Brooke, I wonder, many years later, when we all pass out on this planet, what would you want your gravestone to say about you? And I can give you my answer first.
Ooh, I'd love to hear yours. I'm thinking there's a couple things that popped into my mind.
I'm just so curious yours. And I've been thinking about this for a long time. So I want my gravestone to say, of course, my name, but I want to say, she lived. I once lived. I want to experience all the up, all the down, and everything in between. I want the whole world. I want to just see, I lived, I experienced, I try. I see the rainbow, I see the sunshine, I see the mountain, I see the river, I see everything in between. And therefore, I had the journey of a lifetime. I lived. That's all I want.
I love that. What popped into my mind is right before you shared I lived, I want my gravestone to be something that's continuing to be active. What I mean by that is the first thought. So I'm going to go with it because that's usually the best one, or the one that's most appropriate. Is she's living in love, and that
Yes.
I think in this living is this idea of a continuation, and allows for people to interpret
Yeah.
whatever they want from that and take whatever they want from that. And so I think having it be something that is active or a continuation of probably is what I would love to see.
What would be the love meant for you?
What would be the what?
The love meant in that statement.
Oh gosh. I think that the love in that statement is from the standpoint of choosing to love. Mm-hmm. And I say that because I desire to practice love and being loving and sharing that. And I don't always do it well. And so this idea of living in love is a reminder that it's a practice, and it's something that is more difficult on some days than in others. And but every moment or every day can be renewed in that sentiment. And so I think it's really that love is a reminder, and it ultimately becomes a choice. And it can on some days be a really difficult choice, and on other days be a no-brainer, or somewhere in between. But it is ultimately a choice.
I love that. So Brooke, with that, I'm curious. You've been a long way, you've been a long journey, whether it is, C executive at multiple businesses or your own startup venture. And, I wonder, how would you say is your superpower? What made you successful? What made you special up to this moment?
So there's a bit of a demarcation, I think, in when I look at different aspects of my career. I think early on in my career, I would have said my superpower was perseverance and being able to work hard and make anything work. Mm-hmm. And I'm using my hands right now for people listening in a way where it's like bringing force to something. Mm-hmm. That did work for me for a long time. Mm-hmm. It also burnt me out. I am positive it burnt other people out around me. Mm-hmm. However, it worked then. What works now is not trying to force things. And so I think the superpower that I have come to develop, because it's been an important part of a learning about myself, is my intuition to respond in the moment. Mm-hmm. And that has helped me. And it's also helped me understand, like, maybe this is where sparks of wisdom come from for people, is like being able to respond in the moment from a place of intuition and understanding oneself. Mm-hmm. And that, I believe, is more of a helpful superpower for me going forward. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't always the case. That wasn't always how I approached things or how I would have answered that question.
Wow. Receptivity. I think that's the hardest thing in the world. I think difficult. If you think about what is the hardest, say, object on this planet, oftentimes we think about the mountain, we think about the rock, we think about the diamond, those hardest objects you can imagine. And yet, if you think about water, she go around the mountain, she carved its own way. Ultimately, water leads the way to the ocean. And maybe at the moment, the rock is more forceful and more strenuous compared to water, but at the end of the day, it's the water that have the ultimate power to shaping the path of the river, of the ocean. So therefore, I definitely concur and inspired by the answer. Receptivity definitely is something that I believe ultimately is a strength.
Yeah. And I like that you reframed it as receptivity, because I think that nails it.
Brooke, I wonder, what is your definition for success? And with that, are you successful?
Oh, goodness. I really have to think about this one. My definition for success now is really being able to live from a place of inner contentment. I mean, I definitely have aspirations to be able to create companies and make money and provide for my friends and family. But that isn't what I hold as the place of success for me. It's really the inner joy that can radiate when I'm listening to what is most authentic within me. And that, gosh, when I can do that consistently and walk in that way where that is what exudes just as a result of my being, that really is a place of success for me.
Are you a success?
Yes and no. On some days that I feel like that is a place where I live, and on other days it can be really strenuous. But overall, I do believe I'm a success because I am committed to practicing in that way.
Beautiful.
So that it can become true when the time is right, and when I've been presented the lessons that I need to learn.
Wow. I think when we have the clarity regarding what we want, when we know exactly what we want the journey to end, we are already a success because we can see it. We are right there with it. With that, Brooke, I wonder, what is your biggest fear?
Oh, I've been working on this with my coach recently. And what I am starting to realize is that probably my biggest fear is maybe rooted in fully embracing my own potential without limitations. And I've noticed, and I can imagine other people may be able to relate to this, that we often put constraints around what we think is successful or is a home run or is something that is kind of reaching the pinnacle of an actor or so. But often that can be limiting. And it can be limiting because what is on the other side of that is the unknown. And that's really scary because we have to relinquish control. We have to untether ourselves, and we have to allow and surrender, whatever that might be. And so I've started to wonder if that my biggest fear is of really opening up the floodgates of my full potential and allowing myself to remove limitations.
Are you there yet?
I'm working on it.
What holds you back?
Oh, what's holding me back?
If they are.
Oh gosh, I'm sure many things within my psyche that I'm still processing.
We all work in
there's
progress.
Probably nothing holding me back. This is going to be something I say that is not from my own experience. It's definitely from, when you learn from sages and wise teachers, that what ultimately people realize is that they were the ones holding themselves back. And so, yeah, there's aspects of me that probably still live in the shadows that are there. And it's why I am fortunate to work with some amazing coaches and have some wonderful people around me who can help me see those things and slowly remove those limitations so that I can really unleash that full potential and hopefully in that also support others in doing so.
Yeah, I think we are all work in progress. And, ultimately when we have the right people surrounded around us and we can learn from each other, we can be better every single day. So with that, Brooke, I'm curious, along the year, you not only have your own businesses, but you also mentor and advise many, many startups along the journey. I'm curious, from the advisor or mentor perspective, what do you think is the top one mistake that oftentimes you see founders are making in their journey, especially in the earlier stage of the venture?
The top mistake. What I see early as a top mistake that actually sometimes works out. However, I do believe that setting out to build a great company, and companies are made of people. And that means building great people around you is one of the mistakes I see founders make the most, because they often start first with, how am I going to get the capital and from whom am I going to get the capital? And we're so conditioned now to seek that from third-party sources instead of getting to know our customer.
Oh.
And so I see there's a couple things. One is setting out with great understanding as a founder. Why do you want to do something? Why is it so important that you bring this into the world? Because it is an expression of you. Build something that's great first and spend time truly and authentically discovering your customer. And then it's amazing how that becomes the basis for predictable and sustainable revenue that can be supportive in raising capital. I just find that too early, people start to focus on raising capital. And guess what? When that happens, all of a sudden, your customer becomes your investor. It has to be so, because they're the ones giving you the money, not your customer who's buying your product or your service or your idea. And so I think that's probably the place where it can be a turning point for founders and what their company becomes.
I really love that. I oftentimes tell founders, without the why, what doesn't matter. And oftentimes founders are so fascinated about their own product, their solution, their technologies, and without digging into the why, without really falling in love with your customers, without really understanding the inside, the gap in the market, without knowing really how they serve the market. And then they focus so much about, how do I raise the capital? This is my product, all that other pieces. And I love that you said so beautifully, really solving a problem for customer is first and foremost. So with that, Brooke, I wonder, what would you say would be advice you're given to entrepreneurs? If they are starting a journey, maybe early journey, or maybe they're already in the trenches right now, in the hustling, right? What would you tell her or him, a piece of advice you will share, helping them on the entrepreneur journey?
Yeah, I think the advice that I would give is recognize that it will take longer than what most believe that it will take. And part of that, I believe, comes from so much of the way that we share stories about business successes, make it seem like overnight success is a no-brainer. But it's never an overnight success. And so there is this idea of valuing and honoring the idea that you're bringing forward, and recognizing that the hard part starts at execution, not at idea. And that execution with discipline and habit and setting out to build a great company and build great people around you takes time. And that is something that if as a founder, you can look at your business as something that's going to take time, then you can decide, is this also worth my time? Is this worth me spending the most precious resource we really have, which is our time and our passion and our joy? Is this worth that? And if the answer is, hell yes, it is worth it, then go forth and create and build. If it's not, if you get a grip in your stomach that says, oh, I'm not sure about that, maybe go back to the drawing board and see like what would be worth the time. And even if you're in the middle of it and you've got mud all over your face and you're just trying to survive, take a moment to ask, because it may be that, yes, what you have conceived is the best use of your time. But the way in which you've been going about it is causing you to feel like you're swimming upstream and you're wasting energy that is very precious. But if you took a deep breath to say, gosh, how might I redirect this energy into something that can give me that forward momentum? Then you can really bring your business into a different perspective to move it forward, even if you're in the throes of things and you've hit a place where it feels like it's stagnating. So I think that's probably where I would give that little piece of advice.
Wow. So execution is the key. And I really love that, Brooke, you have such an intention to be self-aware, knowing that, every single moment we are making a choice. Thinking about whether this is worth our time, our joy, our passion, all the choices we're making, and thinking, is it really what I want? And I think when we're able to allow ourselves live in the authentic present moment, and yet also sharing our gift, whether it's for you, it's building this fantastic business. For her, it's open a bakery shop. For him, it's being an amazing teacher he wants to be. Is whatever choice we made, we can all become the most incredible version of ourselves. So with that, Brooke, thank you so much for sharing your wisdoms in this show, and thank you so much for being so open, so authentic. We really, really enjoy. So thank you so much. Also, thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in today. I hope you like the show as much as I do, and we cannot wait to see you all next time. Bye, guys.
Thank you.